If you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com.
Welcome to the Truth Would Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 328. Today, I'm joined by Brent Hits to talk Virginia public land and wind bumping bucks, so stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine on this 22nd day of March. I think it's the 22nd. But feels like spring has finally sprung here in eastern PA, which is good for the North Piece scouting, but bad maybe for the local scouting, since green up is going to start really kind of popping. I did get a chance to get out yesterday and do a little bit of scouting. Actually, this past weekend I got to do three of my favorite things, which is watch the wrestling national championship tournament. Basically watched that Thursday through Saturday. Penn State brought home a team natty and a couple individual championships, so that was awesome. And was able to do some jiu-jitsu on Friday and on Sunday, which was awesome. And then was able to actually get out and do some scouting locally. There was a piece. There were two. Well, actually, there's more than three, but there were kind of three pieces that were all kind of in this one general area that I had never scouted. I had driven by, had looked at, but never kind of had a chance to walk through. And they're not too terribly big. It's just kind of maybe overlooked spots might be one way to say it. And so this past weekend had a nice day on Saturday before the national finals started that evening, and was able to get out and kind of and walk through these. And so I didn't have terribly high hopes. It's just one of those areas that kind of always in the back of my mind was like, man, you've never looked at those. You should probably go take a look at them. So I managed to make it through two of them and kind of give them a good sachet. I probably need one more session in that general area, and I'll feel like I kind of know if there's any good stuff there to be found. But some of this area is just so thick that you can't even walk through. So I spent part of the scouting session just kind of walking the edges of this stuff, trying to find a soft spot to get into it, and eventually finally did find a soft spot to slip into where some of the thicker stuff was. Found a couple scrapes, and then I did find during the course of the entire day, I found one really good, what I would consider to be a community scrape. The scrape was dished out. There was a historical, I wouldn't go as far as to say a signpost rub, but there was a historical, really good rub on a tree that had a dished out community scrape underneath of it. And that community scrape had, I think in my Instagram post or story, I mentioned that there was 4 licking branches, but I missed 2 that were off to the right-hand side. And so there's actually 6 licking branches. So there's almost like one giant scrape where you could almost consider it to be 3 different scrapes that all kind of connect under this one tree. And so I marked that, actually hung a camera on that. And what I've started doing a little bit differently with my camera hangs this year is I'm hanging a lot of them, even SD card cameras. I'm hanging them with solar panels just so I don't have to go back in there, because I honestly don't know when I'm going to get back into that spot to check it. It may not be till October, till I make my way back in there, and it might be one of those places I don't even get to, this year, and it might have to just be a camera that hangs for the entire season until I get a chance to get in there, this time next year, to pull the camera. So I hung a SP18 solar panel on that and put that over the scrape, and so that setup is good to go. And then as I was kind of scouting my way through, I ended up finding a couple really nice rubs that weren't far off from this. So all this, the whole time I walked yesterday, and I walked the stuff that was probably the thickest and the best opportunity to kind of, where mature deer or deer in general are going to want to spend time, because there's some open hardwoods that's around it, and I just avoid that stuff. The nice thing was I didn't see really any human sign in this particular area, and I actually found that a little bit surprising, because just generally speaking, it's not a super hard area to get into, which is probably why the past couple years I've kind of, I don't want to say I've ignored it, but just kind of overlooked it, but did not see really one stitch of hunter sign that was in there. There was no ladder stands or bright eyes or anything like that. So I may have found a little gem spot. So that was kind of the highlight of the weekend. No sheds were found, which is not surprising since I'm not a great shed hunter. But with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. I have a super rad show for you guys today. I have on Brent Hits. Brent is from Virginia. He's a Virginia public land hunter. He actually hunts in and around some, I'll just say kind of, I don't want to say suburban areas, but he a lot of the hunting he does is on smaller parcel pieces of public land. And so we're not thinking of big woods necessarily in today's session. It's probably more akin to what a lot of us have that's readily accessible. I know for me, I like big woods hunting. That's what I do whenever I go to the North Piece. But by and large, what I do around me locally is a lot more akin to kind of what Brent is doing in Virginia, which is, smaller parcels, a lot of pressure, where your probably best option is to play, pinch points, funnels, and maybe kind of timing, the rut most specifically. He's very much a beast disciple. And what I mean by that is, there was a point in his hunting life where he found the hunting beast, like a lot of us probably have, and it really kind of changed the way he hunted. And then all of a sudden from that point forward, he started seeing more and more success. And so what we talk about on this show is just his approach, generally speaking, to how he approaches his hunts, whether he's aggressive, not aggressive, I don't want to say passive, but more observation. And then also he had a run of 4 years in a row that he killed mature public land bucks in Virginia. And the area he's hunting in Virginia is very similar to kind of, where I hunt in PA. There's a lot of pressure. So finding mature deer is just hard in general. And then killing them on public land, is even harder. And then to do it 4 years in a row on a mature deer on public land in that area of Virginia is no small feat. And that's what he actually got done. And so we talked through those 4 different hunts and how they kind of came about, how they were similar and how they were slightly different. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have on a fella. Truthfully, it's like I've watched him on social media a little bit, but it was actually Greg Litzinger actually texted me the one day, or actually he messaged me on Instagram and was like, man, you should have this guy on. He's like, he's had an incredible 4-year run on public land in Virginia, and you should totally talk to him. And so I kind of checked you out, and I was like, well, hell yeah, man. I was like, this guy obviously knows what he's doing, and I'm talking about none other than Mr. Brent Hits. What's going on, man? How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. We were just talking before we started recording. Just glad the work day is over and my mind can finally wander back to the whitetail woods uninhibited. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was telling you. Yeah, glad to be done after a day of work and get back home.
That's right. That's right, man. So how's things been going, man? Are you how's your postseason scouting going? You been getting out in the timber, trying to lay your plans or lay your traps for next year?
I am. So basically, there's a new place, piece of public and stuff that I'm, checking out. So tried to get in there a little bit and check things out before it kind of closed down.
Mm-hmm.
And basically just looking forward to turkey season coming up. I think it opens up for us on the 8th of April.
Okay.
So I'll kind of be able to get back out there, and I kind of use turkey season a little bit just to scout. I'll turkey hunt a little bit, but it's mostly just scouting for deer.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I always say, man, I make no bones about it. I am the world's worst turkey hunter, admittedly, and I'm proud of that badge because I essentially just use it as a reason to get out into the woods and look for some whitetail sign.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Same.
a lot easier for me to sell it to the family, like, hey, I'm going to go hunt, and it's like, oh yeah, go hunt. But rather than, hey, I'm just going to walk around the woods and try to find deer sign. It's
Yeah.
a little more acceptable with the wife of actually hunting, quote unquote.
Yep.
Right. Nice, man. So you're exploring. So like typically in the off season, are you like, how much time do you spend like dialing in previous spots that you have versus kind of going out and finding, brand new spots that you've never maybe been to before?
Well, so the main spot I hunt, I mean, I know it pretty well. So
Okay.
it's gotten to the point now where, and I think that's kind of led to some of the success that I've had,
Mhm.
but I know it fairly well. So I really don't have to dissect many new spots.
Mhm.
There's always spots that are coming and going, especially on the, public land with, if someone got into it that year, I might back off. If I haven't been into a spot in a while, I might check that out. But I'm always on Google Earth, scouting and stuff on maps. I'm real big into that. So, that's kind of how it goes. But, with the new piece, I've been, hitting the ground and, just trying to find different spots,
Right.
and get the lay of the land on some of the new spots. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, map scouting obviously is like one of the like most critical kind of pieces, especially if it's a brand new spot. Like, what are you, I know things that I like to look for, and I know it's dependent on, I guess, the terrain of the area that I'm in and things of that nature. But,
Mm-hmm.
what are you like? Cause, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll start with like how big is, I don't want you to give like anything descriptive that might give away your, give away locations,
Uh-huh.
but like, give me a sense of scale. Are we talking like a piece of public that's like 500 to 1,000 acres? Are we talking like 5,000 to 10,000 acres? Like what, just give me a sense of scale of the place.
So, I'll say this. So most of the stuff I hunt is basically on like the eastern half of the state in
Hmm.
Virginia. So, I mean, it consists of some wildlife management areas.
Hmm.
And a lot of those are out in the western part, but there are a few that are closer to the eastern part of the state.
Hmm.
Um, you got 95, and there's a bunch of military bases. There's like 4 military bases, that you can have access to. And then some of the counties will allow like their parks. You can hunt at their parks and things like that.
Right.
So that's, I'm hunting majority. I'm hunting one of those, but that's what I have access to basically.
Okay.
So, um, it's not mountains. It's not, but we got a lot of hills and, rolling hills and things like that.
Okay.
Not many marshes or swamps, but there are a few.
Okay.
And that's actually worked out for me in the past. One of those that I got, that string of 4 was off of that. But when I'm looking at the maps, I'm basically, so on Google Earth, I don't know. So I'll do this. There's a little feature on Google Earth where you can basically like enhance the terrain
Mhm.
or the hills. And so, when you're not looking at mountains, it's hard to, hone in on that. But
Right.
if you increase the size of it, um, it it just they stand out. And so, just those little southern, subtle hills and things like that, I'll be able to focus in on that. And
Right.
I'll notice a lot of like, bedding spots and things. And I'm, constantly kind of marking that, and then I'll go check it. Um, but that's kind of how I dive in with that.
Right. So you're looking for, so when you're, I guess let me ask this. So what type of elevation change are you dealing with? I'm guessing it's probably just like a couple hundred feet. Would that be correct?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
that, if
Okay.
that. So we're talking like, yeah, 100 feet, 150. But it's it's amazing how, just even though the elevation change is not that much,
Mhm.
they still, bucks will still use, that as a spot to bed, to overlook things, even if it's real subtle or small. Um, that's what I've noticed, at least where the terrain I'm in.
And so when you're doing your map scouting, like you're really kind of honing in, trying to find like those subtle, just like variations in elevation as your starting points. Is that really kind of how you like? I guess your starting point.
Yeah, I mean, it was more so like just over the years. So
Mm,
I've hunted this area for for a long time, but it wasn't something that like happened overnight. So I was real big into the hunting beast,
hmm.
um, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners,
Yeah, for sure.
know what that
I
is.
always say Dan's
Um,
responsible for a lot of deer getting killed.
he is for sure. So I dive into that, and I'm just like, okay, over the years, I'm putting things together. Like I'm always kicking something out, on this little ridge or this little hill. And so then you start checking it, and yeah, there's beds there. It's accurate. And I was just surprised, I guess, to find out that even though the change isn't that significant, um, and it's not hill country or anything like that, you're still getting that. So yeah, I mean, I focus in on that. And a million other things, but that's one of the things. Yeah,
Right.
for
That'll
sure.
be a place that maybe you start, that'll be a reason why maybe your interest gets piqued for a spot, would be something like that.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, especially with the new ground and stuff.
right.
That's kind of
Especially if you don't know
where I'm
anything about the
starting.
place.
Yeah.
It's a good kind of like beacon, if you will. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah. It's interesting too, how you're kind of saying like over time, like you start to, like, uh, you're a hunting beast. I always kind of like to say like a hunting beast disciple, right? Like I am too, that's kind of how
Yep.
I, whenever I started kind of actually, getting into the type of deer I wanted to get into and killing the deer that I wanted to kill and stuff like that. It was because I really kind of, was talking to Dan and, was paying attention to the forum and because of the podcast, I was able to have some conversations with him and stuff like that. And that
Hmm.
was when, I guess I became kind of a disciple and I kind of took that approach to being a little bit more aggressive. I wouldn't call myself a bed hunter necessarily. I will hunt close to bedding, but I'm not a sit on top of a bed type of hunter. But what you kind of said was like picking little things out that that you're noticing, right? And that I think is like the framework of that hunting beast style. It's not a one size fits all. It's like take the pieces that work for like your area and start adapting them and hone them in for the spots that you're hunting. It's not a one size fits all. Cause I imagine a lot of people, if they're not in like regular hill country, when they see these little kind of rises and stuff like that, they might discount them because it's like, well, how do you get 3/4 of the way up something that's only like 50 feet tall? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like to get that like thermal tunnel or that little area where, bucks are going to want to bed. But if that's all you have in the area, then it's all relative, and so that stuff
Yeah.
kind of starts to hold true. And it sounds like that's what you were kind of seeing.
Yeah. And the thermal tunnel thing, like uh, that may happen in those little 100-foot drops that you have, or 150-foot drops you have, but
Mhm.
I think more it's just that they're able to see a little bit further
Right.
than they would just laying up on a flat or laying down the bottom. Like they're just too vulnerable in those situations. I think they just get up on those ridges, and it ends up being about that third,
Right.
especially kind of where I'm at.
Right. Right. So I mean, you found the hunting beast and kind of, started adapting things and things like that. But how did you get started hunting overall? I mean, did you grow up in a hunting family? Was this just like a birthright, or was it something you kind of picked up on your own?
So yeah, so my dad always hunted, and so he was in the military, and so he ended up in like Northern Virginia. Um, and we have like a cabin that we're a member of in Pennsylvania.
Hmm, okay.
So we'd go up there every year. Um, and it's like right in the middle of the state, like Amish country,
Okay. Yeah.
state college area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I got into it that way, just hunting once a year, rifle season. But then he like switched over to bow, and he got me into it at a real young age, and then that was it. Like I was just, you know, pretty much, bow and arrow only,
Hmm.
archery only. Um, and so we'll still go up there, but it's more of just the camaraderie of the cabin. Now it's not necessarily about the hunting.
Right. Yeah. No, I can totally dig that. That's the same thing for me. It's like I'll go back home every now and then, hang out with the guys. My father-in-law and stuff has a camp. I started off very similarly, even though I was from PA. I didn't go to like, PA specifically for a camp. We just had a family kind of, cabin that we would all kind of go to and stuff like that. And so I started off,
Hmm.
very much the same way. What was it about picking up a bow that kind of changed your perspective? Was there like a seminal moment, like, in your hunting journey when you picked up a bow that like sealed the deal for you that you were like, okay, yeah, this is all I want to do?
Not really, because it had happened at such like a young age, I
Hmm.
guess. It was just something that I did. I definitely liked the bow and that up close, getting like, right up close and personal.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then it was just evolved to like, you know, all right, this is, you kind of grow up, and I was seeing guys that when I was younger, and I'm like, how are they doing this?
Right.
And so then, hunting bees, stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, I want to be one of those guys. Let's like dive into it. And that's kind of how it evolved for me.
Right.
Um, I just got to a point where I was like, if they're doing it, I can do it. And, let's figure it out. And it just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about that approach. I mean, there's always, things you need to know or understand or, strategies, if you will, or just knowledge, right? Spending time in the woods. It's the best way to get it,
Hmm.
right? But there's a component of, especially like beast style hunting, which is, that willingness to just grind. You know what I mean? Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen in a day. It may not happen in a season, but if you just keep putting your time in and paying attention to things, like it'll all start to make sense at some point, right? There's always,
Hmm.
at least that's the way it was for me. And I'm curious for you if there was like, when as you were bow hunting, you were getting older and like when you found like the hunting beast and stuff like that, and you were like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to like, this is, I want to do what these guys are doing.
Hmm.
Like, was there like one specific thing that when you figured that out, and I say figured out in a loose term, like, because you never figure anything out wholly, right? But like when you finally understood how to use a specific strategy or a tactic, was there one thing that kind of changed like your world? And for me, I'll give you an example. For me, it was like I was playing the wind, but like it wasn't until like I could finally like understand how to predict what the thermals were going to do in a spot in relationship to the wind without actually being there. That's
Hmm.
when things changed. Like I can remember it was an Iowa hunt and I finally like it just clicked. And then from there going forward, it was like my encounters went way up. I was always kind of set up in the right spot. Like it just changed my whole world. And for me, that was kind of like the one thing was like being able to know what was going to happen in that spot with from a wind and thermal standpoint without having to be there. So I'm curious for you if there was like one thing that when you were like, man, when I finally figured this part out, like man, the game got a lot easier or it made a lot more sense.
Yeah. I mean, the wind is definitely a big thing. I mean, there's two main things, the wind being one of them, um, that I never even took into consideration, um, when I was younger and hunting.
Mhm.
Um, but so the wind was one, and then the other one was just getting into my location as quietly as possible.
Mm, mhm.
Um, whether that just be going super slow, taking a creek, um, but I used to not pay any attention to this.
Right.
And I take it to the extreme now, maybe almost too much. Like, so there's been a couple of times I've been, I'm going in and evening hunt or something like that, and I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, all right, I got another 150 yards to go. I still need to get set up in the tree. I'm only gonna have like less than an hour to hunt. Might need to pick it up a little bit here. So,
Right.
um,
Right.
but I noticed from doing that, I mean, I'll walk in on deer now. That never happened.
Mhm.
I just think the average hunter is just cutting through the woods
Yeah.
way too quick.
Yeah.
And they're kicking and blowing everything out before they even get there. I'll be setting up a lot now and have deer kind of come in. I posted something on Instagram where I'm like up in the like at the bottom of the tree and I've barely set up yet, and I got deer coming in, and I take out the camera and I'll film them and stuff. But Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens way more than it used to. Um, and just not kicking deer out and keeping them close to where you are. I mean, that's just a big advantage right there.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to go find them then. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're hunting where you know they are and you can be quiet enough to get in to be around them, then they're usually never too far away.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
How much are you? So what does your access look like? Because it sounds like with the patience that you have in terms of how you get into like a tree or whatever the case is. Like I imagine like you're probably pretty methodical about your access too, because I can't imagine someone would take that much time and go that slow and not be paying attention to like their access overall, their entry and exit.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, as you mentioned, like with the wind, so I'm not only looking at like where the wind, like what direction the wind's blowing for that hunt, but it's all the things that go into that with the wind. So, like, where's my scent blowing as I'm walking in? And, is my scent going to be blowing in the bedding areas? Um, you know, where's my scent going when I'm on stand? And then, like you mentioned, the is it swirling? How are the
Mhm.
thermals playing in that area? But I mean, access wise, like I do some, I do some weird things. Like, so you have parking areas at any public place.
Right.
Um, sometimes I'll go in and just loop around. Sometimes I'll just walk, right along, the road and then cut in. I'll circle back. Kind of anything, to kind of just change it up a little bit. And but it's all based on the wind and what the wind's doing. So.
Right. So when you go in, for let's just say an evening hunt, right? And because there's different schools of thought for this, right? Like,
Hmm.
well, I guess the first question would be like, I'm assuming you're always usually hunting in and around a bedding area, right? Would that be a fair assumption, or does that change throughout the year for you?
Um, yes and no. I
Mhm.
mean, so it's it's tough just in general with the terrain that I'm hunting. So because it's more of like a suburban areas,
Mhm.
um, there's no agriculture.
Okay.
So there's no cornfields. It's just woods. It's as close as you can get it to, like just big woods hunting,
Yeah.
but in a suburban setting because there's no ag.
Right.
So some of the spots are big, some of them are smaller, but um, yeah. And what were you getting at?
So yeah, no. So the question was really just, I'm assuming that you're trying to hunt bedding areas for the most part, but I was just curious if that changes throughout the season, because I had a question about just like how you use the wind for entry, that might be a little bit different, but I wanted to get a sense of like the type of areas you were hunting, like what type of kind of, situations you were set up in.
No, yeah, that's right. So that's where I was going with it. So um, because there's no like agriculture, there's not like super defined bedding spots.
Got it.
There's areas where they'll bed because it's thick, um, but it just changes up so much, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and the bedding is so sporadic. At least that's what I've seen. Um, that I'm more focusing instead of like bedding areas, just areas where I think the deer are held up.
Are going to be congregating
Um,
during that particular time.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I can
So,
I can totally relate to that because there's some suburban stuff like around me that I've hunted, and I still hunt, and that's kind of how it plays out too. Where it's like one year, I mean, I had daylight pictures out the wazoo between like 12 and 2, like almost
mhm,
daily, and I knew that they were bedding like in that spot. Fast forward to the next year, and like the subsequent 3 years after that, and it's like freaking ghost town in that particular
mhm,
spot. You know what I mean? It's like they just up and left for whatever reason. Like there was no major change. It didn't matter. There was one small like crop field that wasn't too far away, and
mhm,
even as it rotated, I thought maybe there was something to do with the crop rotation, but it didn't matter what year it was. It all of a sudden, like the deer just were gone in that particular spot. And so I totally get what you're saying. So the question I was going to ask is, when you go in for your access, because you were talking about like paying attention to the wind, like sometimes, like for me, for example, it's like I might go in knowing that like there probably aren't going to be deer in that general area, maybe as I'm walking in, or especially if I don't think it's close to like super close to bedding. And I might walk in with the wrong wind because I'm setting up for the wind to switch as it's switching throughout the day. So the wind is right for me to hunt it whenever I think the deer are going to come through. And so do you play, because it's like those small lots, like you almost have to start to think about like, especially if they're not betting there, it's like, cause it's more of a transition game than at that point. And so then you have to kind of set up for the transition. So the wind might be wrong at noon, but it's going to be right at 3, but I need to be there before 3. Cause if not, then I'm going to be screwed with the wind. So is that a game you play as well?
Yeah, I guess not as much. But I mean, I'm just really honing in on like how, just making sure that my wind's not blowing into areas where I think the deer are going to be coming from.
Okay.
So I'll try to walk through like the biggest open timber in the woods. And, sometimes it takes me, a different route around. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. You're focusing on the wind as it lies as you're walking in, is like what you're making sure that I know should be deer in this particular area. I'm going to do everything I can to avoid my wind blowing in that general direction, because I think that's where they're held up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like,
for the most part, yeah.
I mean, even though you're not hunting quote unquote bedding areas all the time necessarily, like you're almost hunting those places like bedding areas to a degree.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. So, given all that, man, how was your most recent, how was the 2022 season for you? How did things shake out?
So it wasn't like the past years. I had one opportunity early on a nice buck, and it was, I think it was opening day. Um, I think I was either in there on opening day, or it was the day before opening day, and got into a spot, and no one had been back in there, and kind of opposite from where most of the access would be from. So I just got into this little spot and had a buck come in, and had no idea that he was in there. But the area always has, big deer, and I've had trail cam pics of deer in there, and I think I posted something where I had like 3 bucks fighting on a trail camera.
Nice.
And that was probably about 2 years ago. So there's there's deer, good bucks in there. And all of a sudden I see him, and he's behind me a little bit, catches my wind a little bit, and he comes up this little ridge and goes off. So didn't get, super spooked out of there. So again, also I'm very mobile with what I do. So, the next day I'm in there again, and I adjust to where he's coming, where I think he's going to then go. Cause I think he's still going to come back. He didn't get spooked out of there, very much. And I know the direction that he came from, or at least based on how I entered and where he came from, I'm just making an educated guess.
Right.
So, sure enough, he comes in again, and I'm basically on like the south side of this gully, and he comes up this ridge, but he's on the north side of the gully, and he's probably about, 45 yards away. And with it being early in the season, there's just no way to get a shot through there. So I was about 15 yards, off. And so that was kind of my one opportunity this year, at something. And, but you learn.
Right.
You learn.
Right. Exactly. It's
Is that pretty normal for, the area in Virginia that you're hunting in? Because I always say for me in Pennsylvania, like even if I don't fill a tag, if I get one close encounter within bow range of a mature deer in PA, that's about as good as it's going to get. Like for me in this particular area, there's some other areas that I hunt, that are a little further north. They have better deer, but it's also a lot larger woods to where finding them is a challenge. So like that's kind of my criteria. It's like, man, if I even see like one mature animal in bow range during bow
Hmm.
season, like that's pretty good. That's pretty good, season for me just in general. Is it kind of similar to where you're at, or are the deer numbers, better, caliber of deer better, or how would you describe that?
Um, I mean, there's really not many slammers in Virginia. At least on that, like, the Northern Virginia area. There's a few. I would say like the biggest ones are maybe in the 150s, 160s, but that's like few and far between.
Right.
So, if you're getting something in the 120s, that's good. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll take, seeing stuff too.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. It's a great
but
way to say it, man. I'll take seeing stuff too. It's
yeah,
for sure. For
so,
sure.
and
Beats the alternative.
yeah, and I used to go seasons without even, seeing, a
A shooter
buck of
buck.
that caliber, a
Yeah.
shooter buck. So, that those odds have definitely increased and, throughout the years.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny, how you go through those those learning pains, especially, for anyone out there who's listening, maybe they're a younger person or whatever that's, maybe just finding the hunting beast or the beast style like for the first time or whatever. It's a hard kind of transition to make. Like you might go seasons without really seeing a good buck until like it starts to make sense. Like that's
Hmm.
not abnormal, you know. And the way I always kind of thought about it was, a lot of times if I wasn't seeing deer, I always kind of felt like, especially if I was reading the sign and being diligent about like the woodsmanship aspect of it and stuff like that, was even though I'm not seeing a lot of deer, I feel like I'm in the right spot to see the right deer. It's just my
Yep.
my timing's not right. Like I haven't quite got it dialed in yet. And then
Hmm.
once I started dialing it in, and I still would go sits without seeing deer, but usually when I do, it's usually the one that I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of make a decision at some point. Do I want to see a lot of deer or do I want to see good deer? Because you set up in two very different places to do either one of those things in my
Hmm.
kind of experience. So would you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, for sure. I
Right.
mean, there's times where I'll dive into something and it's like he's either going to be here or he's not going to be here.
Hmm.
But I'm not gonna go to this one spot just because I know there's going to be a whole bunch of deer coming through. Like I'm trying to go after a bigger buck. So um, you just kind of either you know you're either going in or you're getting something or it's bust. So
Right. Right. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious, man. Do you um knowing that like some of those hunts are all or nothing, where it's like I'm going in, it's either a good buck or bust. Like I'm probably not going to see anything, or I'm going to see one that I'm wanting to shoot. How often do you target like a specific deer at any time, or are you more of like an opportunistic kind of bow hunter where it's like I have a caliber in mind that I want to kill, and I'm going to hunt in spots where I either know or think, based on trail camera data, sign, whatever the case is, that there might be one to two to three in this particular area that I'm willing to shoot? Or do you try to hone in on like a particular deer during the course of the season, be like, this is the one I'm going to try to kill?
So not a particular deer. There's been very few times where I've been like, okay, identified a buck and that's what I'm going after. I've
Mm-hmm.
had opportunities and over the course of several years on a particular buck. Um, but no, I would say because I kind of have a good idea of, real good idea of the area I'm hunting, I know where good deer are going to show up
Mm-hmm.
and I know where they're kind of at and hiding out. And, um, so a little bit of that I'll take, I'll put trail cameras out. I'd normally use that for the next year. So I'll be like, okay, we got some good bucks in this area. We got some good bucks over here. Um, and I'll focus in on that. But yeah, there's only been a few times where I've kind of honed in on a specific buck and tried to go after it. And yeah, again, you learn from those mistakes, because I have not got it done doing that yet.
It's usually hard. It ends in heartbreak in my experience, and it's happened to me two different times. Like, one was several years ago, and at that point I vowed to not chase a particular animal anymore.
Yeah.
And then not this past year. Well, this past year there was one in particular I was trying to kill because he was the only one in the area that I knew of, at least local to me, that was of the caliber that I wanted to kill. And I saw him at 40 yards, bedded for 2 hours, and just never got a shot. And but the year prior there was a hammer deer, and there was a couple good deer that I had on camera in 2021, and I usually don't do this, but there was one in particular that I just had me like enamored. And I was like, and he was just like, he was so killable. Like, he was just doing all the stuff you want him to do to be killable. And this leads me into kind of my next question for you. Like, I'm usually pretty aggressive, like usually, especially hunting public land. If I know there's a deer in the area that even just shows up once in daylight, and depending on the time of year, if I think he's going to be somewhat consistent, I will go right in and try to kill him. And I might try to hunt it maybe 2, maybe 3 times in different kind of spots. And if I blow him out, I blow him out, because there's so much hunting pressure in PA. Someone else is going to bump in where he might get killed or whatever. This particular deer, he was one of those ones that had me so kind of enamored that I was kind of moving away from my own kind of like personal approach that I like to take. And I was being really patient. And I was like, all right, he's really consistent. He's like 5 minutes before daylight at this community scrape, like 2 days in a row, and I'm going to lay back because it's not quite right yet. I feel like I've got like a couple more days, and then it'll be like the right time. The net of the story is I hunted him on a couple different occasions where, like, I showed up, I hunted him in an evening, like after work, from like whatever time, 4 to like 6 o'clock or something like that, whatever time it got dark, that time period. This was October. And he was there the next morning at 7:30. You know what I mean? Like, missed him by a couple hours, and I hunted a different spot the next day. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want to be in there 2 days in a row. And then there was another scrape I knew that he was on that I went to hunt him on, and I hunted him, that morning, I think it was, and I got down to move spots or something like that, and he showed up I got down at like noon, and he showed up at 4. That day.
Yeah.
Like, and so I missed him multiple times, and then I never saw him again. Like, I assumed someone killed him because I just never had him on camera again. And that was me kind of going back on, like, I probably would have killed him whenever he showed up the first time in daylight, because it was at the very beginning of the season, and he was in this particular area. It was loaded with acorns around a community scrape, and that's why I was in there. And he was bedded not far away. So leads me to my question. So for you, your hunting style, like, would you consider yourself to be a more aggressive hunter or a more patient hunter? So if you had that same type of scenario, how would you have approached that?
So because it's so pressured where I'm at, there's going to be someone that comes in and blows them out of there. So I am, if I get eyes on something, I'll be in there the next day, or the next day I'm off from work. I'll be right in there again. So in that regard, I would say that I'm pretty aggressive if I see something that I'm trying to get. But probably more, I guess, laid back when I'm not seeing something.
So it almost feels like you like to have a vigil or a confirmation or proof of life, and then once you get proof of life, then it's all in.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but I mean, very rarely has that happened for me. Like, I mean, most of the spots, and I mean, I'll admit, like, a lot of these bucks that I'm getting are during the rut. But it's because I know the area and know where the action's kind of going to be. But yeah, so I'm thinking this one So there was one probably 2 years ago. Um, he came in behind like two other young bucks, and the younger bucks went to this scrape and they were hitting it. Um, he came in and he was probably like 60 yards away, and he did not hit the scrape at all. He kind of stayed. It was almost like he didn't need to hit the scrape.
Yeah.
He
He's too old.
I don't know if
he played. He's played that game before.
yeah, if he was just checking it or
Mhm.
whatever, and he went off. So again, next day I'm in there again, and I just couldn't. He knew I was in that area. He knew, and so I mean, it can work diving in like that. But and I adjusted a little bit to where I needed to be, but I didn't get eyes on him again, but heard some stuff right at dark, and
Right.
that was game over after that. But.
Right. But I mean, it makes sense, like, because I was actually going to, I'll ask you the question because I kind of had a hypothesis, but, what is your preferred time frame to try to kill it, to try to kill a good buck in your area? Is it rut? Is it, October? Is it, I don't know when your season opens in Virginia, but is it early season, late season? What's your favorite kind of primo time?
So buck season opens in October, the first Saturday in October.
Okay.
And it runs through like sometime in January. It's a pretty lengthy season.
Mhm.
So it's again with the areas that I'm hunting. It seems to be hard to. I mean, it's hard to get on bucks for early season anywhere.
Yeah.
But things seem to pick up mid-October. I really like mid-October. I see a lot of action pre-rut, but
yeah, you and I are going to be buddies, I think, because that's my favorite. That's my favorite time in Pennsylvania, at least. I mean, I travel a fair amount to go out of state and hunt and stuff like that, and that's usually always like a rut trip or something like that. But like it's usually I get the woods to myself a little bit. You know what I mean? There's not as many people out because it's not as favorable of a time, because you really have to know a little bit more of what's happening in the woods to make that time work. At least that's what I've found. And I hunt around a lot of scrapes, and so I've just watched them for several years, and I start to time them whenever the activity picks up, because there's a cadence to it I've found, and there'll be different dates, and so I know like certain dates in certain areas pop off, and so that's like my favorite time to be in the whitetail woods. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail. I just got super excited to that someone else also likes that time. So
I mean, just again, observations over the years. Like I've seen not a ton, but I've seen bucks, fighting, and it's normally earlier than I think people think. And they're getting that territory, and especially if you got two bucks in one area. And then I think that's where you get a ton of sign popping up too. If you got two bucks, they're fighting, going after it, they're laying down their sign. If you're finding that mid-October, you're pretty good. I had a buck. I sat there and just, videoed it, and I never took a shot at it, and probably should have. This was probably like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I think it was mid-October then, and he was, there were some fresh scrapes in the area, and I came in and noticed them, and I was like, I don't do a ton of calling, but I just did a little bit of like light rattling, and it was mid-October, and I fired him up because he came in, he makes a couple scrapes as he's coming in, and I was like, I'm going to hold off. It was right about that time frame that I was starting to be a little bit more pickier.
Right.
And should have probably shot him, but
yeah, because that's a cool hunt. Like I always say, like it's either the caliber of deer I want to kill or it's the story.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Where it's because my buddy Greg, he killed one a couple years ago. Maybe it was 2 years ago. It might have been 3. I think it's 2 years ago. And he killed the buck. I mean, it was a good buck. Don't get me wrong, but it was probably something in like most other years he probably would have just passed in general, right? If the deer would have came in by himself or whatever. But that
Yeah.
deer came in and he watched like 2 bucks just like throw down, I forget how long he said it was, but it was like abnormally long, just like knock down,
Mhm.
drag out, like almost to the death kind of fight, like that you would see in like Texas or something.
Yes.
And he was
Yeah.
he's like, after that, he was like, he gave me a shot. He's like, I had to kill him. He was like, he left me no choice. It's
Yeah.
like, but yeah, man, it's
Yeah. I've seen them just, they'll be, sparring a little bit, and then I've seen that knockout fight, and it's wild.
yeah.
I mean, they're just tearing through the woods. They're going up ridges. They're going down. They're in the bottom. And they took a break, came back at it. The whole thing lasted like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's crazy when they really get after it.
Yeah, because it's different than whenever they're just tickling tines, like
Yeah.
prepping. You know what I mean, for the throwdowns that are going to happen, and whenever they decide to get after it, man, it's no holds barred. It's like a steel
Mhm.
cage match, for sure.
Yep.
So man, I want to jump into this 4-year run you've had, dude, because like you had a run of 4 years on public of 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. And it sounds like you're hunting in like pretty pressured areas because it's in and around some suburbs and stuff, and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about each year and kind of how each one of those played out and just get the deets, man, because I mean, killing deer 4 years in a row is hard enough. Or,
Mhm.
and then throw in the fact that, you're doing it in high pressured areas, on public land. Like that's not easy to do, And so I just kind of wanted to see how each one of these play out. If you're game for it, sound good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So let's start with 2018. Let's go in the way back machine. We might be taxing your memory here, but how did how did that one kind of play out? And then I'll kind of lob some questions in as we go.
Okay. So, this one might be the biggest one that I got. Although, let's see, 2018, 2019. The one that I got in 2000, I think was pretty good. He doesn't have all the little kickers and stuff like that, but yeah. So this one kind of got us started off. So I mean, again, I know the area pretty well, and so from observations in the past, there always seems to be a lot of rut activity in there, and um, it's it's an area that, I mean, you could say it's kind of overlooked. Um, it also kind of funnels down into a little bit. So you have a road on, let's just say, like the north side, and then on the south side, that's where all your access is, and it's all kind of funnels down into a strip of woods that's maybe like 150 to 200 yards, at its widest point. But again, I've always noticed a ton of, rut activity in there. There's scrapes. There's always a few rubs in there. And I basically kind of, where it pinches down the most, I just set up in there. So that would be the most kind of like funnel, you
Okay.
could say, that I hunted. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I've noticed this a bunch. So I'll have deer, bucks. They'll be bedded, whether it's off of a funnel or off of a known doe trail, or just a travel corridor. I've had them sit, and they'll just sit there and watch that trail, and does will go by, and they will go down, check where that doe was, and then either go back and sit down, or they'll continue after it if it's a hot doe.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because like I used to not think about that a whole lot. And it wasn't until I talked to, I think it was John Eberhart. I was talking to him one day. I think it was either on the podcast or maybe we had a phone call or whatever it was. And we were just talking about, because I kind of, the way I hunt is very much a combination of like John and Dan, right? Like it's that beast style. Like I do like to move a lot. I'm somewhat aggressive, but I hunt a lot of primary scrape areas, just like John does. Like that's like his favorite kind of setups, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And what he was kind of telling me was, to pay attention to, was that especially if you're hunting like a more mature deer for your area, and I say that it's relative, right? So in PA, like where I live, a mature deer would be 4.5 because we don't get very many deer in this area that would get older than that. I might only find maybe one, maybe two of those a year in this particular area, right? And he was like in and around those, community scrapes and stuff like that. He's like, a lot of times he's like, there will be a rut bed that's not far away. He's like, because that mature deer, especially if it's a good community scrape close to doe bedding, he's like, he's going to park his butt there and he's just going to wait for does as opposed to spending energy trying to find them. Like he already knows where they're at. He's like, why wouldn't he just lay down and wait for them to come by him? And so I noticed it happened this year. That was actually what that buck did. He came and bedded just downwind about 40 yards of a scrape that I was hunting. And that's where he was at. And then there was a bed in this area in Ohio that there was this big scrape that always popped off every year. I presumed it was a community scrape just by the activity because it got action all year round. And it wasn't until like I knew of that scrape for probably 3 years. And it wasn't until I scouted the backside of this ridge finally. And 60 yards below that scrape, on the downwind side of that scrape on that ridge, was a giant buck bed. And so I was like, oh my God, how many times have I walked by this and there been a buck laying there? You know what I mean? Because I was hunting somewhere else, like something to intercept on the way to that scrape. But he was actually down the other side and actually just bedded, waiting for does to walk by to scent check him. Yeah. So, I mean, a long way of saying, like, yeah, I've totally seen that. And as I've been paying more attention to it, I see it more often.
Yeah. And the first time it happened, I didn't put two and two together. I mean, these does go by. I don't even know that there's a buck bedded there. These does go by. He just comes down, starts sniffing around, and then he walks up the ridge 20 yards and beds back down. And so then I'm like, okay, now I can see where he's bedded. And again, never really put two and two together. But then fast forward, to this buck, same thing kind of happened. Doe came into this, this funnel, and all of a sudden, so she walks by, and then all of a sudden I see, he pops up, and it was probably like maybe 45 minutes before closing time, and he had gotten up, and he was just in this one area and would not move. He just stayed in this little 20-yard pocket. But that's all it took was that doe to come through, and then he followed her. So that time I got lucky. It was a hot doe and not one that wasn't. And
right.
it was. He came right by at like 15 yards.
Nice.
And that was that. So
nice. But I mean, you put yourself in that spot, right? I mean, he was just,
Yeah, and it goes back to just that previous, I guess, knowledge that I had. I was probably in my like early 20s, and I had gone into the same general area, very, very close. And I'm sitting there, I had this stand on my back. It was the big like API stands and climbers. And this doe comes again, kind of through that funnel area. And I got this stand on my back. I draw back and I shoot this doe. And she runs off. And I finally like drop the stand off my back, put everything down, and then here comes this buck. He was nice, but back in those days, I really wasn't too focused on. I was just like, okay, get a deer.
You were just killing deer at that point. Yeah.
And so the area has kind of always just been a rut area. Everything just I think does maybe congregate to that area, and so then it brings in the bucks. But
nice.
That was that one. So.
Awesome. So let's fast forward now to 2019. What happened this year? So the buck in 2019, did you know about this deer previously or anything, or was this more of like, kind of scouting your way in, or how did this hunt play out?
So, again, it was an area that I had always seen bucks. And when I think I said earlier, like there's one swamp, and a very small swamp. But this would be the closest, to Dan style, I guess, where he just dives into the swamp. Right. So I had hunted previous years, kind of looking into this swamp, and again, back in my like early 20s and stuff, I'd always seen some big deer coming out of it and had an opportunity one time and never put two and two together. And then, you start getting on the hunting beast and things, and then you're like, wait a second, there's a reason that deer's coming from there. Um, so, and it is hard to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
No one's, your average hunter's not going in there. And so it was the first time I kind of was like, all right, let me dive into this swamp. And it's, I would say, maybe like 150, 200 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just backs up into like marshes and water.
Okay.
So I dropped down in there and I'm almost contemplating leaving because I can't find a tree in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your problem with swamps. But
Right.
there's one
few and far between.
Yeah. And so again, I know bucks are bedded in there. And so I find the one tree that I can get into. I was probably only like 12 feet off the ground. I had to like break a couple little branches as quietly as possible going up there to get, a shooting lane. Cause this
Mhm.
particular tree had just limbs coming out everywhere.
Right.
But it worked out because it was good cover too. So, yeah, so this buck comes in, and the funny thing with this one is, so he comes in and I can hear him off, and he's rubbing this bush, because there's not many trees in there that you can rub, but he's rubbing this bush, and he comes through this opening, and he's got this like hay stuff and half of this bush on his rack, and he looks massive. But half of his rack, like, you can't see because it's covered up by this stuff. So, he came in, but so I shot him. It was probably, and it's not the biggest deer, but it was just that first hunt where I kind of was like, all right, I've seen stuff in here. I know there's deer in here. Let me dive in. Try to be as quiet as possible, and and had something come out. So
That's awesome.
um,
What time of
yeah.
year? What time of year was that deer?
I think that one was like the day before. It was either the last day or the second to last day of October.
Okay.
So
Nice.
right around that Halloween time.
Nice. Yeah, that's a prime time. So what like, did you have an idea like where about this deer was potentially bedding in that swamp, or was it more of just a like,
So
I
it's
know he's in
the
there somewhere?
the it's again, it's such a small area. So you're kind of talking, I would say 150 by 300 is
Okay.
this total swamp before it just goes back either into hardwoods or out into just like cattails and
Mm-hmm.
water. So and only half of that area is actually huntable.
Got it.
So you can't go all the way back there. And there'd be no reason to because you end up kicking everything out. But so um, no, I didn't know he was back there. I just knew that it holds deer, and
Right.
in public land, it's a place that guys aren't going, and it's where they're going to be hiding at that time frame.
And rightly so, right? Like, there wasn't really a tree or much of a tree to get into, and so that's for me. That's always kind of like a good sign. If I find a spot that has a little bit of deer sign that there aren't really trees to get into, I'm usually like, yeah, it's just a matter of like what time of year should I be in the spot?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, you're not getting a climber in any of those trees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just being mobile and having that type of setup is key in that situation, I think.
Yeah, nice. There's one spot. It's not a swamp, but it reminds me, as you were kind of describing it, like a new spot that I found this year. I hunted it maybe, I think, twice in very early October. I hunted it from the ground. I was really just trying to kill a doe because it set up like a really good rut spot. That was kind of
Hmm.
what I assumed, just based on the sign that was there and stuff like that. And like, to what you were saying, like, the area that the deer were going to want to kind of move through, there wasn't really any trees to get into. There's a bunch of cedars and stuff like that, and that was about it. And I didn't hunt it all during the rut. I was away, And so when I pulled that camera here just a couple weeks ago, I didn't have but one good deer all year that I knew of. That was the one I had the encounter with. But the second deer I
Mm-hmm.
had was in that spot. That was a really good buck. He showed up like 3 times during like the first 2 weeks of November. I think it was actually the first week of November, 3 different times.
Yeah.
And it's one of those areas you're kind of talking about where it's like there's no human sign around it. It's actually not that hard to get into, but it's just there's really not really any huntable trees around it. And if you do get into a tree, like the shooting is crap. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you kind of have to hunt it from the ground for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising why, I saw deer in there all the time, like does just hanging out in there during daylight, like they're bedded not far away from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just one of those spots where they're always going to be coming out of there, and there's no way for them to come out the back end, like I said, because it's water and stuff. But
Right.
so, and I went in there this year and had a ton of does coming out, but no bucks. But um, once a year I'll hunt it, and then I'm out.
Right. So let's move to you've knocked down 2 in a row now. Let's go to 2020. How did that year or that season play out? Or that deer, I guess.
Yeah, so 2020. So that buck, this one was interesting because I posted this one on my Instagram on social media. So this was a spot where um, basically the access, I will come in and I'll basically just do almost like a big C shape
Mm-hmm.
and almost circle back around to um, to the parking area. Um, and you can cut in from the parking area probably 100 yards and get to where I'm going, but it's that's where the thickest part of the area is. So again, I
Got it.
think
Yeah.
does bucks, they're kind of up in that area, and so I won't I'll take the long way around.
Yeah.
But so I looped in, and it's off of a main road, um, and so you have to be like 100 yards away from the road. So kind of get right up into that spot that I can be in, and had and what's weird is, so I almost think when you come in and you do like a big C shape, so I'm basically walking through, and blows my scent blows like northwest is the
Mm-hmm.
predominant wind. Um, so as I'm coming in, my scent is literally blowing into the area.
Hmm.
It's blowing into where I'm gonna hunt. And so, but because I'm circling then all the way around, instead of the deer coming out then and going to the north, they come down towards the road and they go to the south. At least that's how it's played out a bunch of
Right.
times. So I'm almost like wind bumping them, like as I
Yeah.
come in, like, hey, we're not going to go this way. We just smelled somebody up that way. So we're going to go, when it's in evening time, we're going to go the other way.
Right.
So I had all these does around me in the evening for probably about 45 minutes, and it gets pretty close to closing. And again, it's just an area that I know well. I know there's good bucks in there. I've had trail cam picks and stuff like that. So, like I said, I normally don't do a ton of calling and things like that, but because there were does in the area, it was around rut. So I did just like a last ditch snort wheeze,
Mm-hmm.
and it's only happened once, but this something just comes tearing up this little ridge, and I think it only works because he was monitoring, I think, those does.
Right.
I couldn't see him from where he was, but so he had an eye on them, and he's like, okay, someone someone else is here. Like, this ain't happening.
Someone's trying
So
to
he
eat
just
my.
comes.
Someone's trying to eat my porridge. You know. Like,
Yeah.
it's
So he comes tearing up this ridge, and he immediately starts making this scrape, and I come to the full draw on him, and I shoot, and I hit a little too far. I can't remember. Let's see. He was facing that way, so I hit a little too far forward and hit him the shoulder a little bit, and I can see the arrow. It didn't go through. And so instant, like, just crushed.
Yeah.
So I give it some time, and I hunt a lot with my dad, so we're searching the area for, all night. Come back the next morning. The only thing we found like a speck of blood in a scrape, probably about 150, 200 yards away. And so I was like, yeah, this deer definitely lived. Like,
Right.
he's got a speck
He's
of
already
blood.
checking out scrapes.
Yeah, he went straight to a scrape.
Right.
And so when you follow where he went up, he can go across the creek, or he can go further into this area that I was hunting. So there's a lot of hunter access and stuff like that to the one side. So I was like, he's not going that way. He's got to be going across this creek and on the other side. And we had zigzagged through that area so much, I basically just drew a huge X through that spot. Like, he wasn't going to be there. So fast forward like 1 week, I'm like, well, let me give it a shot. Like, if he's going to be anywhere in this area still, he's going to be in this other, bedding area that I know, which is across the creek.
Right.
So I cross the creek, get into my spot, and all of a sudden, probably 30 minutes before dark, this deer comes out and he's limping. And I'm like, there's no way this is happening. So he gets probably like 30 yards away, and he's not stopping. So I have to, I don't like to, like, whistle at a deer or anything like that, but I start, give it a little whistle. He doesn't stop. I basically was screaming at this deer at one point.
Nice.
And finally he stops and got a second shot on him, and he didn't make it very far after the second shot.
the second one worked.
Yeah.
What time of year was this one?
So this was in 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that one.
No, but what time of year was it?
This one was later. This one was maybe in between that first and second rut.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look up exactly when that.
So like
one
middle of
was,
November, essentially, is roughly.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. So we've knocked 3 down in a row, and so now we're on to 2021. What happened? What happened with this one?
So this one was, I didn't think it was going to happen. It was later in the year. I think I shot it like sometime in December.
Maybe. Oh wow. Okay, so late
first
season.
week.
So
in
you've
December,
kind of had, like, with all 4 of these, you've had like October, end of October, right? Like early rut, and then late rut.
A couple of them were right in the rut. They were, because they were chasing does and coming through with those. And the one was right after the rut, and then this one was later season. So yeah, either that first or second week in December, and I had scouted this area the year before, and I'm always marking where other hunters and stuff are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this one spot, and I mark it on the map, and I go check it out, and sure enough, there's a stand up there, and I'm like, okay, but I check it out, it looks real old.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one's been in there for a long time. And I think it was after the season too when I was scouting this. And so there was basically like 2 huge rub lines that basically like intersected. And you had 2 rub lines, you had a transition between like pines and regular hardwoods, and just a ton of oaks everywhere. And so I marked kind of where I wanted to be, and then I stayed out of there until and I think I hunted that spot twice that year. I hunted it once in the morning early, like maybe probably like the 20th of October.
Okay.
And then didn't see anything in there, and then didn't go back in there until again like the the first or second week in December. But they were still hitting acorns. The 2021, we just had a ton of acorns.
Yeah, same
This year,
here. I didn't have any this year. How about you?
None.
Yeah.
None. And that was probably one of my not making an adjustment with that, because I mean it's basically just it's where I'm at. The majority of where I'm hunting is just it all leads up to these oak flats, and the whole area that I hunt, that's kind of how it is. And so
Right.
you really have to kind of get off the beaten path. But there was just nothing this year as far as oaks go.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that I learned. I kind of know where the deer might be now if we have another scenario where there's no oaks.
Right.
But so yeah, so I scouted this spot. I had liked it. Ton of good sign and stuff through there, and it kind of butts up to. I mean, it's pretty far back in there. So again, it's one of those spots that most people probably aren't going back into. But I got back in there, and there's an area that you can't hunt up to the north, kind of north and west, and that's where they came from. And so it was 3 bucks that came off of this ridge. They were all feeding on oaks, and they were bachelored up mid-December, which was interesting. And I don't know if they were maybe bachelored up, but they were all in one specific area.
Right.
So they came out, and he came up this ridge towards the like scrape where it intersects, or those rub lines where they intersect, and he was just feeding on acorns the whole time. They all 3 of the bucks were, and there's probably one in the group that was a little bit bigger, but he wasn't coming over to where I was. So yeah, the other guy got it. So.
The other guy, he took the he
sacrifice
took,
for the team. Yeah.
Sacrificial lamb. Man, that's awesome, dude. That's a crazy run of 4 years, and you did it at like different times of the year. Whether it was October, prime rut, late rut, late season, food, chasing. You know what I mean? Like it was all different kind of approaches. Not that I was glad to hear you didn't have acorns this year, but like it at least like gives me some solace, because I didn't have any either. And a lot of my spots, similar to you, we had a very similar story to where, I had that one good encounter. It sounds like you had like a really good kind of like one encounter for this year that just didn't work out. And then after that, it was, just all the spots that I had kind of earmarked that I knew had good acorns for October just did not produce, like not a single one of them. And so I was chasing then at that point, and really was making a plan on the fly. And even then, it's like I was having a hard time even just finding sign, because I could not find where like they were wanting to spend time. I just could not find the secondary food source that they were using.
Yeah, that was the other big issue with it this year. Is so I probably wasted most of my hunts going in and being like, okay, well, let me check this spot. I know there's oaks. There should 100%. Be something dropping here.
Yeah.
But throughout doing that multiple times, there's also just no sign.
Yeah.
So at least where I'm at, I think it's very dependent on, on oaks and things like that, because like I said, there is no agriculture. So
right.
That's their primary.
Yeah. Same here. Like it's, there's not really ag around. And so I'm kind of beholden to whatever the forest is going to provide.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, next year that I have a decent acorn crop that I can play off of. It makes things a lot easier.
Yeah. I've heard people, like, I've had conversations where they say, oh, it's good when they'll be traveling more. And, when I would be on the other end of the spectrum on that one.
Yeah.
I think at least if there's oaks dropping everywhere, like I can get into a little spot where there's at least going to be deer there.
Yeah.
Versus I don't think they move around. I mean, searching like all these places and just going around trying to find oaks. Like if there's no oaks in that area, they're all gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely something to be said. I think it depends on like what types of areas you're hunting. So like,
the north piece that I hunt that is big woods, like I don't want a lot of acorns necessarily there, because when I find them, because there's not a lot of food there, it's browsed, like then like I'm in the money spot. You know what I mean? Like without a doubt, but the sign is also very sparse up there too. Now locally, where I typically will have a little bit more sign, I typically want a bunch of acorns, because I'm really hunting in and around like these primary scrape areas, and they typically have like, pretty good acorn drop in and around those areas, because it's usually adjacent to doe bedding. The does want to bed where the food is, and so, you do the math, 1 + 1 = 2. You got does, you got food, you got a big primary scrape, boom, you're going to have a buck, and so for me, it's like similar to you, at least around here, it's like, I want a lot of them, because the areas that I'm hunting like has, multiple things that all kind of make that spot good. It's not just the acorns. It's like, it's my access with the acorns, with the doe bedding, with a primary scrape, and all those things mean that spot. I don't care if there's acorns elsewhere. Like that spot is the spot, I guess it's kind of how I look at it. But well, man, we've been chatting for a little over an hour, man. I want to be sensitive to your time. I appreciate you coming on and giving me some of your evening to chat deer hunting. Before I let you go, though, if you wouldn't mind, let folks know where they can follow you and find out more about you, and follow along with your hunting season this upcoming year.
Yeah, so I'm just on Instagram when it comes to social media. So it's Old Dominion BH. So like Virginia, Old Dominion is the nickname. So it's OL and then Dominion and then BH, which is my initials and bow hunter. So
awesome, man.
Kind of doubles.
right. Awesome, dude. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and let's make sure to stay in touch. I might have to shoot you a couple images of that deer I was chasing, and so you can see what had me heartbroken, not last year, but the year before.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's been fun.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Spartan Forge, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.